We've had an incredible 2.5 days now of screenings, panels, workshops, parties, tears, hugs, laughs, screams at our horror film screening last night. So yeah, it's been a wonderful weekend, and we're still going. Next up, first I want apologies to everyone here. We are running 45 minutes behind schedule. So if everybody would like to have a drink on the house, it's on us. Yeah. I should have said that at the beginning. Damn. Okay, so we're going to start with 5x10 talks. 30 minutes. We have 4 amazing tech projects to come on the stage to talk about. We're going to start with Mark Swarek, who is in integrated media at NYU.
Hello, so I'm Mark Swarek. I'm a full-time faculty member at NYU Polytech, and I'm the director of NYU's Mobile Augmented Reality Lab. So we actually work with creating digital content that orients itself to the real world. Basically, kind of taking your digital experience out of the computer and putting it around you in your natural everyday experience. So I've been working with the flood for some time, so this is what I'll be talking about in my body of work. We've been working with basically flooding the world using augmented reality, and using the flood as kind of a starting point. Oops, we're going in the wrong direction. No, we're not doing too well, sorry. So this is one of the first works I did that was with the flood. This is actually a glacier. We did an intervention at the Museum of Modern Art, and the museum actually picked up on it and they endorsed the intervention. But what you're looking at, this is the Museum of Modern Art in front of the glacier. This is augmented reality, so it's sort of like you're standing in a video game. The glacier, which would be kind of here in the foreground, would be digitally generated content overlaying the street. So it was like a sculptural parade of these giant masses of ice basically floating down the street as they would go along. We also did floods everywhere. So we flooded the Whitney. I was commissioned by the Nikolai Museum in Denmark to flood Copenhagen. And we played a big part in the Occupy Wall Street movement. We did actually the first augmented protest. We had people from all around the world showing up at the Occupy movement. And after we did that, I was actually asked to go up north in the Hudson Valley. They had one of the towns had been basically decimated by the financial crisis, and all of the storefronts were basically shut down in this quiet town on the main street. And they asked us to continue the Occupy movement. So what I did was I flooded the town, and this is a Thomas Cole painting. This is actually, we're slightly kind of commissioned through the Thomas Cole. And I was creating different kind of boats to try to sail through the flood. This is actually a skateboard. So with augmented reality, I would use some type of device like a smartphone or a pair of glasses like Google Glass. I could look at the skateboard. I wouldn't see a skateboard. I would see this little boat. This wasn't seaworthy, so we had to kind of take it up a notch. So I was going to sail through the flood as the king. So I was going to observe the devastation as the king. So this was me in my car, and what would happen is as you would look at the car, you would see my boat. So you would kind of see a boat kind of sailing through the town as I drove down Main Street. This is another show I did in Devotion Gallery, which was in Brooklyn, and this was an app which would allow you to create different things. We performed in the gallery. Basically, I flooded the gallery during the performance, and we had basically musicians playing, and we attempted a rescue attempt to try to save the people who were stranded on these kind of makeshift rafts and to get them out. But this is all happening and it's animated, so I was making the water kind of grow and get bigger, and the situation was becoming more desperate as time went on. More shots from within the gallery, more shots from the gallery. We flooded the Armory show. This is the Dumbo Arts Festival. And I basically turned the Brooklyn Bridge Park into an island. This is what it looked like on your phones. It's not post-production. If you're kind of moving my phone around, I would see the the grass, but then I'd be surrounded by water and these kind of sea creatures, ominous sea creatures. And I turned everybody on the island into deer. So anybody who would come to the island, we would transform them into deer, and then I would grant their wishes. So they could come and ask for something, and I would attempt to make it come true. And a shot through the phone. This is me transformed into a deer on the island. This is all seen, this is real time through your device. And another person transformed into a deer on the island. We had performers. He was also a deer. That was the saxophone playing deer at the Dunmore Rushfoot. And this is myself granting wishes at the festival. So they would come up to me and you could see the flooded the the Art Basel in Miami. That's Miami. Flooded Art Basel, Miami. Flooded pretty much everything. This was the Fountain Fair. They actually had a boat in the middle of the space, and they were prepared for the flood, so they made it through. The main Art Basel. I think it's a design show. You can't be an intervention if there's no selfie. So I got in there. Untitled, the design show again. This was actually beautiful because the waves were kind of moving up and down, and they're kind of playing off the forms under the design show. I was actually recently commissioned to do to flood a town in Switzerland by the Swiss government. And this was based off of Dante's Inferno. So this is what they were asking for. This was a loose sketch. And this is kind of where it ended up. This is kind of the direction that the piece kind of ended in. So this is a newer iteration of the project. We're making new floods all the time. This is blanketing the earth, and yeah. So this is my augmented flood work. Thank you very much. So very quickly, I'm going to do a very tiny transition. We're going to look at one of my graduate students' work, Carlos, who is not here, who did the landmine piece. So it'll be quick. So what's happening is Carlos and I are working on landmine removal, and we're working in Colombia. We're actually working with the Colombian government and the Colombian military. Carlos is not able to be here with us today because he's actually in Colombia talking with the Colombian military about how we can actually make this a reality. So many of you may or may not know, but that Colombia is probably the second most affected by landmines right now, second country most affected by landmines, the second rate of highest kind of casualties or dismemberment. So what's happening is we're creating a technology which allows people to more safely clear the landmines. This is our idea. So Carlos's really original idea. What would happen is we wear a special pair of glasses. I'm walking down the trail, and what will happen is we have basically this computer vision taking place with the glasses. It's looking for landmines. I'm also using my eyes at the same time. We're not claiming that this is like a surefire way of detecting every landmine, but at the same time, if I had 4 eyes versus 2 eyes, the odds would be better of finding the landmine using some type of computer vision. Once we've detected the landmine, then what we could do is, using 3D tracking, essentially I could make a 3D model of this monitor. I could look at it, and then I could get a lock on top of it. The model would orient itself to the real world object, and then I could see how to take the landmine apart. It could actually show me how to disassemble the landmine. Other things that we could do, I could watch other people disassembling the same landmine that's in front of me. So I could watch a video of somebody going into the same kind of situation that I was about to go into. And then other things that are happening. So one of the reasons this project is going on right now is that the FARC has recently released all the locations of the landmines across Colombia, which is a major kind of deal. And we're able to mark out large swaths of land which have landmines. So this would affect the general population. A student could have this, and they could look and they could say that this general area, this hill, is covered with landmines. So this could have a real impact on the larger community. So that's our piece. Cool.
So, hello, I'm Catherine Bennett. I am a media artist and I'm an interactive engineer. I develop technology to talk about different phenomena with memory, relationships, and some of the more poetic aspects of life. I like to create things like this. This is called Sleeping Thoughts, because I was curious about what it would feel like to walk through a three-dimensional field of stars. So I wired up about 120 lights, hung them down from the ceiling at like different lengths. And it was really interesting, like watching people like come into this installation. You know, some people, like for the opening, everybody just sort of like sat down, right? And they just sort of stayed, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I think about these universal experiences that we all have and how we can use technology to sort of talk about those in a different sort of format. And so I was thinking about this technology, and I'm thinking about like how we could take circuits and sort of wire them up with sensors and put them in a space. So the space could sort of have a nervous system. And so this is then ether, because I was curious about what if a space could have its own memory, and what if that memory could sort of be autonomous. So there's several behaviors that happen with this space. So you can leave a message or a memory with the space.
Miss my home. I miss it.
And then that memory is in your short-term memory. So it's feathered back through this space 4 times before it slips into the deeper memory. The light is controlled by the amplitude of the audio, right? So we have a sense of this other person, this presence that was there. But like, memory is really fragile, right? It can be re-recorded over, right? It can degrade, you can lose different parts of it. So the system had like, another behavior of the system was losing those memories and having those memories sort of like fractured. And there's also like a doorbell over there on the wall. You could like ring the doorbell and it would cause like a deluge of memories. So all the 8 channels would sort of all start going over and over with these different memories. And it was really interesting because then after that, I had a critic sort of email me, and she was like, I was in your installation and I had this big fight with my boyfriend in your piece. And I'm sort of worried about like, where does that argument go? And I was like, this is really interesting, So there are I started thinking more about these like stories that happen in these moments of time and how can we capture that? And I worked on a crisis hotline for several years, and I was also sort of watching social media. So one of my friends who was adopted had this sort of question about whether or not she should accept a friend request from her birth mother. And I was like, gosh, this is incredibly personal. And then so all these friends started having this like dialogue, and these people that don't even know each other are talking about this incredibly personal incident that my friend is dealing with in that way. And so I started watching how technology is sort of shaping our social interactions, right? And our communication practices in that way. So I created another piece called the depository, right? And the depository isn't a physical space, right? It's a place where you can call in, leave different messages, and listen to different messages left by others. So it's completely anonymous. And some people were really interested in that, and they wanted to have that piece exhibited. But this piece is something that you only experience over the phone line. So then I created another piece. This is called Oral Outpost, right? So I felted these cocoons, and I submerged a light and speaker inside each one of them. And what happens is this pulls down like sound files from the depository and plays them here in this space. So it acts as sort of like a listening post. So there's no way to interact with the piece in this space, but you can sort of hear this activity that's going on in the installation. So light and sound are really important to me because they can kind of represent a person in that way, but also the ephemerality of that. So the person doesn't have to physically be there, but the light and sound sort of stand in as a presence of that person. And thinking about that more, thinking about like how we use this technology, right? So earlier in the other room, I was showing memory capsules, right? Because when we work with technology, we can do a lot of different things. We can rearrange things, we can edit things, we can have different algorithms sort of show us different things. And so this piece, you breathe on it, right? Because breath is something that sustains us. It's something that we all know. And our memory sort of impacts our identity, and they sort of help us like guide us through the future in that way. So I was thinking about how we could use our breath to stir up different memories at times. So these sort of enshroud and protect these memories, right? So in other pieces I have the memories sort of degrade and decay and they fracture. This one sort of preserves them in that way. And so I'm thinking more about technology in our culture, right? And how much we use technology, because we end up, sort of being like this, right? We have these devices and we use these devices all the time. But how much are we using technology to show us different things? And then how much of it is a mirror and how much of it is actually like shaping us and shaping how we move through life? Right, because we have things like coming at us like all the time, right? There's like things that are pinging, like you have all these alerts going off on your phone and things get a little crazy. So another piece I'm working on right now, what I've done, I don't know if you're familiar with Google Voice, right? Is anybody here familiar with Google Voice? So I wired my number up to Google Voice, and this piece is called Transmissions from the System, right? Because Google Voice gives you these really messy transcriptions of your voicemails, right? But they're terrible, but I think they're so great because I just sort of like read them and sort of decipher what people are talking about, and I never call people back, right? And that's a little messed up because that's affecting, how I communicate and how I interact with my friends in that way. So there's something going on here. So these voicemail transcriptions are going to print out to this little screen. There's going to be a light that moves in accordance with the audio, but at the same time, like you're not going to have that message there, right? Because technology is sort of like erasing, the heart of what's going on there. So that's Transmissions from the System. I'm Catherine Bennett, so thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for Brave and Joaquin coming out here. My name is Seth Carnes. I'm an artist. I'm based in the Lower East Side, and I'm here to talk about poetry. I'm also here to talk about the internet and apps and some ideas of sort of moving with text and image through the medium, the digital networks these days. What I want to do is I've made an app artwork. It's called Poetics, but I want to kind of explore some of the body of work that led to making the app, and that was all physical installations around New York and around the world. If you want to go and check out some things, like that's my handle on Twitter, so that's probably the best source there for some websites and whatnot. So yeah, what's that? How about? So I put the dates below because it's kind of been a long progression of work, like where I've been really focused on the discipline and the exploration of the ideas, and sticking with the materials, and then progressing. I work on concepts, so I'll think of an idea and then I make the idea, test it out in the gallery or even in public sometimes with the work, and then I'll just like iterate and move from there. So this was in 2007 in Sweden. I had done a show at PS1 and met a curator, and she was really supportive of just what are you working on, the question towards me, and then I said, I'm thinking of this idea of mutable text was kind of in my head at the time, and the idea there was is there a way to make a text that stays alive from my authorship and then in the hands of others as it moves? So I wrote this text here, fabricated as these magnets and put them on a big steel wall that was installed. And over there on the left, you can see there's leftover kind of vocabulary that wasn't in my text or my poem. And then throughout the exhibition, I would organize the text in the beginning of the night, and then everyone would start moving around across the ages. The Swedes are really good at poetry in English. It's pretty interesting. I mean, I did it in Miami, I did it in Napa Valley, and I did it in New York. And honestly, like the Swedes, it was really interesting to see how they worked with the English text and moved it around. So, oh, come on, why does it keep doing that? Sorry. So you can see some of the frames here. I did a time-lapse film. I was always like recording it so I could kind of look back and see how the text morphed in the hands of all the audience. So this is just one day. So you can see top left was the beginning of the text, and at the end I would just pop in there and redo it. There was a point where one kid, for example, a college kid, I don't know where they are. These guys over here, they were collaboratively working together, and they made a text about beating a child. And then a kid who was like about 7 came in, looked at it, like kind of pondered the whole text, and then he went at it and he changed it to, why would one beat a child? If you wanted, why would you beat a child? Question mark, exclamation point. And that was like really resonating with me as we go on later, like looking at a sort of child perception of this text and actually like editing it. Because for me, it's like you look at text, you look at work, but like then when you go touch it, you start getting into this idea of like, what is the meaning of that one text? Is it an image and your body moves it? So it's kind of like your whole the flow of your mind and your body together. And I just learned the word for this because I had to talk at Columbia. It's called I met all these theorists. It's called embodied cognition. So it's like as you're moving and your gestures change meaning, you're like collaborating. You're having an integrated experience of yourself, but also when you're with other people, it's like in that medium of the physical world at that time. And then I just wanted to keep working on it. So, I can show you a little video here. So there you can see that those are the guys that were writing the beating a child right down. See, beating a child right there. It's pretty blurry, but we're not going to get to the kid. But I just want to show you like kind of how it goes with. It's kind of like ants and food. Except it's text and humans. I kept going with installations. I'm just going to jump through these. Like I installed myself with a typewriter. This is in Chelsea for this big show. And I would type on magnet paper and then do cut-ups of the text I was making with people to kind of like they would tell me a story, I'd channel it, re-edit it and put it on some steel of some kind, either give it to them or put it up on the walls. And then people would go around. So you can see there's like Polaroid images of them, and the back text was also being operated on by people. So you can see me, I'm working with these kids here. And then they would rearrange these texts in the back of the big steel wall. And these 2 women spent about 3 hours making that text. So we had a nice little shot together. This is with another artist in the show. He brought his journal, so we like reworked his journal entry into a poetic text, and then it was just like a collaboration between Chris and I. Started working with magnetic paint. I was doing some interventions in Chelsea at this one gallery, and then I would type the words on the magnet paper and then paint these various gestures or strokes, or just paint. This is a magnetic paint around the small canvas. Again, just leave it in the gallery, see what happens as people kind of go in there with these small pieces and edit. And finally, I was like thinking, okay, I want to go the digital world with this idea, and I've done all this research. It's kind of like artistic scientific method of sorts, just like, okay, I've got the flow. I know what parts of the real world I want to take into the digital, and that's the app. It's done. That's all I did. No, just kidding. It's a mock-up. It's just like the magnetic text on a cardboard piece. But I was playing around with the idea of like, all right, well, if I'm going to make this into an app, like, and I want to arrange the text, is it going to work okay? Shoot. So I was pretty confident about it. I did a Kickstarter. It succeeded. This is like back in 2011, as you can see. Just FYI, nowhere near enough if you want to make an app. Depends though. I mean, if you can make it your own, you could also make it for $500. It kind of depends. But this is the app when it was launched. It's called Poetics. I made it, just FYI, I made it free while I was sitting down there. So if you all have iPhones, it's on that platform. So if you want to get it in the next few hours, you can download it. This is like the latest kind of version of it where I flattened it a little. And the way it works is there's a physics engine inside the app. And so the text itself has these characteristics of collision and construction, and there are all these gestures. So you can kind of lift the word, move it over here, push it into another one, and make your meaning that way. And also there's imagery. So that's the new twist on it, is use the camera so you can take photos, and then you're just working with those planes of the image and the text and the relationship. And you can share it like all normal kind of apps out there. So it's interesting, like it's gone all over the world. People use it because you can change the languages. So it's used in the States all over. And then Saudi Arabia is number 2. I have no idea what is going on over there, but I want to know. So if any of you guys know, like you can let me know, like if you have connections there. And what's been really interesting is education. It turns out all these teachers started downloading, and they're teaching across a lot of different grades. Like there's a teacher at Chelsea, PS 33. She's doing 3rd grade vocabulary. I have a few pictures she sent me. This is where it is. Africa is, the middle of Africa is really the only place where there's not people using it right now. And this is an example. This is not like every day, but this is just to see. It's just amazing. Like this is one day where I had a show, I think, and I made it free. I don't know. And then someone on the internet wrote about it. And sometimes it'll just go like and take off. But this is across a whole month. Just people. And I'm not. By the way, I have no idea who these people are. I respect the privacy. It's just someone opened it up and is using the app in the place. But this is just also like within the lineage of poetry and conceptual art. Great poet, and this is just an idea, that like there's a certain element of like linguistic kind of equation we're doing, in communication. And so part of what I'm doing with the app is I want to make a sort of version of poetry for today that still keeps the embodied feeling of poetry, but it's also like contemporary and not stuck in like the printing press or text that never changes, because I feel like that's kind of the last century. This is a show I did last month on Bowery. So I made a custom Tumblr, and so myself and some other poets and visual artists, we all had the app. Some in New York, some in Switzerland and Italy. And what we did was we were all making work and uploading it. It would be projected in the gallery, and the idea was a dialogue. So it was a loop of 15. We'd look at the loop, and someone would respond, and then it would go into the window in a loop. So all week, every night, you would come there and you'd see like this progression of images and some relation. It wasn't like direct, but you could get a story and a meaning from it. This is like one of mine. Some of you guys have been there. It's like right below Whole Foods and the Y. Oh, well, I'm going to hurry up. There's a whole controversy that happened around the show, but I think it's probably good to just speed up and go to the education side. But if you, it was kind of hectic. You can go on Twitter. There's like, the quick of it is some people got offended by the artwork, didn't know who the artist was, who was making the work, because it was in the window. And then they published an article about it. Then there were threats to like break the art and break the windows, and they didn't even know it. So it went on and to the point where we had to do a response to explain the source and the concept, because it got really hectic for a lot of people. But it was interesting. This is Alicia. She teaches with it in Chelsea, and this is something she wrote on her Scholastic website about the app. I just want to show you a few pictures. It's really cute. So they're doing this like visual thesaurus. They take pictures and like identify characteristics of these animals and do their printouts. And this is just what she wrote on the website. So here's what you can do with the app. We can do vocab development. And this is another example of hers making, kind of crossing geometric concepts with the poetic text to remember the ideas. And then I eventually, the teachers led me to have a more formal relationship. I did work with the Department of Education this summer, so the New York one. So what we did was, this is STEAM. This is concept that science, technology, engineering, and math also can have arts, and there are a lot of studies coming out now where the mind, it turns out, right, that if you have the discipline and the creativity side of your mind working in tandem and you're applying it to engineering or vice versa, you're actually, meaning like you just, the scientific method alone, just the logical application of your mind is not as good, or doesn't have as much effective sort of creative revelation and discovery as integrating everything together. So they're working on the curriculum now to like integrate the ideas, because of course we've known it all along, artists, like, so we've been doing it for centuries, but now the idea is that this artistic practice and this discipline needs to be figured out so that students will be able to like innovate. Like they used Steve Jobs and some other people as examples of people that like a scientist that plays the piano, for example, is more likely to have a genius idea. That's the whole concept there. So I just made a few of the poetics, that's what I call them, and then they had all these high school students that came in from all over New York to do an event at the Civic Hall in middle Manhattan. And these are all the kids. They're staring at their phones like everyone else now. And I'm just going to show a few examples because it's kind of interesting just conceptually like what young kids are doing. So they just took these are those two guys. That's this group. And they took a picture and they just wrote this little storybook of their day at the event. And it's all just like, here we are making some physical like beatbox things, Yeah, I'm going. This is just like, see how they're talking about their shoes? And they were watching the Tumblr, so they were reacting to the Tumblr and looking up on the screen and seeing it. And throwing in some emoji. They were throwing emoji over their faces. But what's interesting for me there is that it's this idea that you can speak with images and words, and like it's a language and it's happening now. And it's over these networks, people are talking through images and emoji and animated GIFs. And just with this app, it's a good example of like, I think where I want to go with it and keep exploring. So that's it. You can download it. It's up on the App Store if you have an iPhone. And yeah, thanks.
So my name is John Belitsky. I am a fashion model, an underwear model. I'm not, but thank you for that. This is my partner over here, Damien Charles. Damien is one of the nicest people I've ever met in the world. And I am conversely decidedly pissed off. I'm an angry person. And so we balance each other. And my anger sort of led to the creation of this product, Demander. And it's built on this idea that markets are really decided by demand, not supply. And this has huge ramifications when you realize that we always speak of supply and demand, but it's really demand and supply. And these ramifications are felt even in film. So if there's any filmmakers here, you can probably attest. The hardest part about filmmaking is understanding how do you get discovered? How do you get this out? You have this passion, you want to do this thing, but how do you get it out? And when you start looking at how markets operate, you become tempted to make a really shitty film because you start to believe that I have to sell to this lowest common denominator consumer. And this is how markets work. And that really, really pisses me off. And this is why I'm so angry. So I thought about this and I said, all right, I'm going to flip this. So we made this marketplace. And it's a demand-side marketplace. And this is a very different thing. Because in this marketplace, you don't go searching for things. You click one button for whatever you want. So, for example, let's say you want a video editor. Okay, so this is primarily built for products right now, but we're going to use this service. I want a video editor. I see this. It's described as video editing service. You demand it. You hit this button. And now everybody in the world who connected to just that one picture can send you a private offer. And now you have a video editor. So you can do this for your director of photography. You could do this for your lighting people. You could do this for your actual physical vinyl, if you're a musician, or your DVD, or whatever you want to sell. You're not being marketed to. This is a human transaction. I want something, give it to me. No one's telling you that there's a scarcity of it. It's just there. Go get it. And so we started thinking, how do we apply this to the actual creation and dissemination of film and music? So the next thing we did is we built this film site. And the way this film site works is, we need to get people to discover these new films. If we can get people to discover new films, we can change which films are being made because people won't have the fear of needing that crappy hook to get the lowest common denominator people in. So we said, all right, what if I could just take you to this exact moment in a film, and I could share with you everything I feel about this one moment, and start thinking about films not as one large body of work, but as a billion tiny little moments, 24 frames per second, over and over for 110 minutes. And so this is Goodfellas, 1990 Scorsese film. I grew up in South Ozone Park, so for me this was like the most important film that was ever made when I was a kid. Yeah, and so what we did here is, you could see if you keep your mouse over the screen, these comments sort of pop up with hashtags, and we can start these conversations. Now, we released this like last week, no one knows about it, so it's still a little broken, so we'll go back to the beginning there. And you'll see sort of like the first comment. And it's just a subtle thing. But if you click on that, next week, an entire conversation can start on that one idea. So this is one of the most famous Scorsese one-e's, long shots ever. And you might have a conversation just about that, about how you have to close down the aperture and glide through the shot and what that feels like and how that contributes to this narrative. And all that can happen in this very focused, meaningful way. And you can take people directly to the moment in this film that resonates with you. And another way that we thought that this might work is, this might be the new way that actors create their reels. So instead of cutting a reel, you could just sort of hashtag these moments that you're in all these films, and someone could just look at your name, go through the hashtag, and now you don't need a reel. Just go directly to the moments where you appear. And the same thing for an editor or a DP, anybody. And so we also applied this to music. Music actually in some ways works better. And we thought, well, one of the big issues with discovery with music is, how do you actually get people to pay attention to you in this sea of media that's out there? So we said, all right, people no longer have 4 minutes to listen to a track, which is disgusting, but it's a reality. Let's just all deal with it. So let's cut it down to 15 seconds. Let's make it one moment. Just listen to this moment. So this is an artist, Mark Yu. This guy he made us actually sign on a record label. And this is his first song that he released. And we actually worked with him to develop this in our lab, in our studio. And this is what 15 seconds feels like. It actually feels kind of long. You get a lot of information in 15 seconds. So we took these 15-second moments and we let people go in and make their own. So why don't you make a clap for them? So we call these moments claps. So now Damien is just going to make his own clap. He's going to find his own favorite 15 seconds. And he might find the 15 seconds that best resonates with his mom. And she loves vocals, so maybe this is exactly the moment he thinks that she'd like. So he'll make this clap, and then he can then send it to her, share it to her, and she can now learn about this artist in 15 seconds or less. And we also created a way for you to sort of hit this button on the bottom here, and it launches what we call Discover mode. Really original. And it just plays 15-second claps in sort of like a fire hydrant treatment. And you just sort of swipe left to right to like it. And that's how you kind of decide if you're going to put it in your playlist or not. Sort of like Tinder for Teens. But we think this is a great tool for filmmakers as well, because all of these artists want to get discovered. So instead of trying to get Tame Impala on your next short film, find one of these artists. These artists will probably give you their music for free. And you would actually be helping them. And you'd be helping them solve a discovery problem that you also have, which is how do you find thoughtful people that are your target audience? And if we can get this community together and start sharing this art and using these types of platforms, we think we could build smarter audiences. And we could identify them, and we could save ourselves from like a world of blockbuster crappy films and terrible top 40 music. And so that's Demander. Guys, go to demander.com if you want to learn more about it. These are all early products, so if you find any bugs in them, let us know. And keep making great art, all of you. Thank you.